Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to concentrate today on our new Clause 36, banning phones from our schools. And this new clause would also write into law some of the content from the very good private members' bill drafted by the Honourable Member for Whitehaven and Workington, because this doesn't need to be a party political issue. Now, when I was on the Science and Technology Committee back in 2018, I got us to do a report on screen time, social media, and children's mental health. And back then, the evidence was already very, very concerning. But by now, every alarm bell should be ringing. Because over the last decade, there's been an explosion in mental health problems among young people all over the world, over the exact same period that smartphones and social media have become dominant in children's lives. And the growth in mental health problems is focused almost entirely among young people, not older people. Children now get smartphones at a very early age. As the Education Select Committee pointed out in a good report last year, 1 in 5 of the UK's 3- and 4-year-olds now have their own smartphone. By the end of primary school, 4 out of 5 kids have a smartphone. And there are many channels, many different ways through which smartphones and social media cause problems for children. They displace time in the real world with friends. US data, for example, shows that prior to 2012, children spent over 2 hours a day with friends. But by 2019, that halved. The proportion of children feeling lonely and isolated at school has exploded all over the developed world. But it's not just a time sink, there's also the lack of sleep. Children are tired in school. ADHD has increased massively. Concentration is impaired. And this is a feature, not a bug. Apps are designed to be addictive and drip feed you dopamine. At a recent school meeting I organised in my own constituency, I heard from local doctors about how excessive screen time is damaging eyesight and giving young kids the kind of back problems that you might expect from someone in late middle age. 8 out of 10 children are now exposed to violent porn before age 18, many at a really young age. The average age kids see porn at now is 13. The shift to a smartphone-based childhood is also leading children to be exposed to graphic violence, sextortion, self-harm encouragement, and doing terrible things to girls' self-image. According to the ONS, 1 in 5 children aged 10 to 15 say they've been bullied online, with 72% of that happening during school time. But as well as being bad in their own right, these different negative effects also come together to damage education. And while a ban of phones in schools can't fix everything, it's a vital first step, and it can make a big difference in itself. I spoke to one head teacher who said that when they went from a policy of phones not being out to a full start of the day to end of the day ban with phones handed in, the number of detentions that they had to hand out fell by 40%, and teacher recruitment and retention improved too. Yeah, I'm happy to give way.
I thank the Shadow Minister for giving way, and please take this as a constructive intervention. As a former teacher, I do know some of the challenges of mobile phones, and the Minister will remember my debate on financial education when hers went off. However, I would ask the Shadow Minister just to consider groups that may require a mobile phone, and I perhaps gave the Shadow Minister a hint as to what I was going to mention, in particular young carers who obviously do need that contact with family and those cared for.
The Honourable Member has brilliantly anticipated a point I was going to make, and if you look at the text of the amendment, you'll see it carefully, he will see it's carefully drafted exactly to allow carve-outs for those who do need them, for example, as health devices. So I hope he is reassured on that point. Madam Deputy Speaker, attempts by the tech industry to lobby, to muddy the water, to run interference and to sow confusion are unconvincing. The problems hitting our children all over the world are not just a coincidence. There is more and more evidence for a causal link. For example, Sapien Labs asked questions about adults' mental health, combined them into a mental health quotient score. They asked the same people when they first got a smartphone, and the results were stark. The earlier you get a phone, the worse your mental health, particularly for girls. And as with smoking, there is a powerful social gradient also developing with smartphones and social media. And that is going to widen gaps in school achievement unless something really decisive is done. Though sadly, many people still don't know, unfortunately, about the risks from smartphones. A growing number of parents do know and are worried about the problems with smartphones and social media. But we face a collective action problem. We worry that our kids will miss out if they are the only ones without them. And that is the problem that needs solving, and government needs to be part of it. Across this country, there has been an explosion of parent-powered campaign groups aiming to fight back. Smartphone-free childhoods, safe screens, delay smartphones, the new Rage Against the Screen campaign. Over the last year, they have gained hundreds of thousands of members. And together with the Shadow Secretary of State and the Leader of the Opposition, we met with some of them this morning, and I pay tribute to their work.
Would my honourable friend give way?
I'm happy to give way.
I'm very grateful for my honourable friend giving way. When I'm visiting schools across my constituency of Epping Forest, many of these schools have instituted policies banning mobile phones, or indeed are consulting to do that. Now, sometimes there is a small degree of pushback from pupils and sometimes indeed from parents. But does my honourable friend agree with me that if the government takes up this amendment, actually it will make it clearer and easier for schools to ban these phones and actually produce a safe and nurturing environment for our pupils in school, and it'd be easier to take it forward?
My honourable friend is completely correct, and I was going to come on to that very point. The Children's Commissioner has said, I honestly think that we will look back in 20 years' time and be absolutely horrified by what we allowed our children to be exposed to. And she is right. So the very first thing government could do is implement a proper ban on phones in our schools. I met with Parent Kind recently, and they said to me, effectively, we're allowing our kids to be fed digital drugs, and we're even allowing the dealers into the schools. And that's got to change. The last government issued guidance. It was a good start, but it's not enough, and it's not working. While 90% of schools say they have some sort of policy or some sort of ban, a survey by Policy Exchange last year found that only 1 in 10 secondary schools has a full start-to-finish ban, the policy that actually works best. Lots of schools are still trying policies where kids have their phones on them, but they're not supposed to have them out. But actually, the effect is that the kids are distracted, the teachers have to stop lessons to tell them to put them away, and you get all of the issues about bullying and social media during break times and more. As the Labour member for Folkestone Hythe pointed out the other day, guidance which was introduced by the previous government is not working. We still have students using phones during break time and during lessons, and the problems this causes are significant. I've had many teachers say to me, this takes up so much time, it's a huge distraction, it interferes with learning. And that's right, we're now in a strange situation where Labour MPs and the Conservative Party agree that the guidance has turned out not to be enough, but the Labour front bench is insisting that it is. We are through the looking glass, Madam Deputy Speaker. So why do we need a full ban, not just guidance? Our general approach, of course, is to give autonomy to schools, but first, the guidance is not working. The Department for Education's own National Behaviour Survey, published in April last year, found that 35% of secondary school teachers reported mobile phones being used during lessons without permission, and the problem's more pronounced for older children. 46% of pupils in years 10 to 11 reported mobile phones being used when they shouldn't have, during most or all lessons. And last month, a survey by Parent Kind found that nearly half of secondary school children say they see phones being used in class where they shouldn't every single day. So the idea that the guidance has done the trick and there's no longer a problem to solve is just contradicted by the department's and the government's own data. And second, we need to support schools and have their back. I know from speaking to teachers and school leaders that the pressures from a minority of parents to allow phones can be very severe. A minority of parents can be unreasonably determined that they must be able to contact their child directly at any minute of the day. But unfortunately, that comes at a cost to everyone else's education. As my honourable friend pointed out, a national ban would make things much simpler. We, the politicians, should take the flak and take the heat off of schools. Third, a full and full-on ban is needed as the start of a wider resetting of social norms about children and smartphones and social media. We need a proper ban so that kids' smartphones are put away for a whole day, including breaks. Breaks should be about physical activity, not just scrolling and scrolling. Schools should be the beachhead, the first place where we recreate the smartphone-free childhood that most of us got to enjoy. 7 hours in which we denormalise just being on your phone all the time for young people. A ban on phones in schools will, of course, not solve all these problems overnight, but it's a vital first step. When I was a health minister, I wanted us to develop an equivalent for this of like 5 bits of fruit and veg a day, or older members might remember public health campaigns like Don't Die of Ignorance or Clunk Click Every Trip. We need to do some big things to reset the culture, and the heavy exposure of our kids to addictive by-design products from the tech industry is like the smoking of our generation. The other day, the Education Secretary said that phones have, quotes, no place in schools. Yet today, the government are going to whip Labour MPs to vote against getting phones out of our schools. This is just silly. Having initially claimed that our proposal for a ban was a, quote, gimmick, the Education Secretary now seems to be executing a very slow U-turn. But when you see the data on what smartphones and social media are doing to our kids, you realise that we can't wait for the Education Secretary to swallow her pride. We need to get on with it. Madam Deputy Speaker, a pattern is emerging. At the start of debates on this bill, we and many of the profession pointed out that the bill would threaten to cut teacher pay. The Education Secretary said, we just didn't understand, that wasn't true. But later on, she was forced to produce pages and pages of amendments to her own bill, and it turned out it wasn't us that didn't understand the legislation. And last summer, Michael Gove was being held up by the Secretary of State as the great Satan of education. But in her most recent speech, he's now become a great education reformer. And just weeks ago, banning phones from our schools was a gimmick, but over the weekend we learned from the Secretary of State that they have no place in our schools. So it's a gimmick, but they have no place in our schools, but they're going to vote against a ban today. Madam Deputy Speaker, I think we can all now see where this is going. So tonight, Labour should swallow their pride. They should vote for our amendment and do the right thing for our children.
Yeah.